What's up YouTube, and welcome to another draw along with me, where today we're going to be creating this kayaking in space design. Now, as always, there's links to everything you're going to need in the requirements section of the description down below, as well as helpful guides to install palettes and anything else that you may need for today's design. As always, when you're finished with today's design, make sure to tag me in it over on Instagram and share them with the community that we have over on Discord. There'll be links to both in the description, as well as a link to my Patreon, where I post 3 exclusive tutorials every single month to my Patreon supporters with a catalogue of nearly 90 at the time of recording. There's no better time to join than today, so make sure to support the channel by checking that out in the description down below. And with all that said, let's get started. Once you've created your canvas, the first thing we'll do is we'll go up to our actions. We're going to go to the canvas tab and we're going to turn on the drawing guide. We're going to edit that drawing guide and we're going to change the grid size here to 500 or whatever is a quarter of your canvas size and hit done, just so you can match up scale wise to mine. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to make sure in our empty layer, we've got one here. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab this color here at the bottom of that second column from the right. You want to go to your selection tool and use the rectangle option, and we're going to go ahead and turn on color fill. And we're going to go ahead and draw in a rectangle here for where the water is going to be. Something around about this is good. Tap on your selection tool when you're done. We're then going to go ahead and we'll keep that layer at the top. We'll create a new layer, drag it all the way underneath, and we're going to go and start on our background. So if we go to our background color, first of all, we're going to go ahead and grab this color here in the bottom right of the palette, just ever so slightly off from this layer here at the bottom. Hit done. And then on this empty layer, we're going to go ahead and draw in the main beam that's going to sort of run down the center of our design. So we're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab this color here in the top right of the palette. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to painting and then Nico Roll. And I've got the brush size set to 16%. Now what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to draw in a straight line down with heavy pressure at the top and get gradually lighter to the point where it pretty much disappears here. Don't worry if you don't, you can go ahead and sort of blend it out in a moment. So I'm just going to start here. I'm going to draw in a heavy line and then get really, really light as I get further down and pop my finger on the screen to make sure it's a nice straight line. And you want it to sort of fade out into the middle of that third row down of your grid. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is go to our adjustments. We're going to go to motion blur. And once we do that, we're going to drag down in a vertical fashion just to sort of blend it all together and create this cool fade out effect as well at the bottom. And in your line there, you might get some sort of variation in the colors, which I think looks pretty cool. So no stress over that. If it doesn't look exactly like mine, it's fine. So we're going to go up to about sort of 55%, really sort of stretch that out vertically, and then tap on our adjustments when we're done. I'm going to grab my cursor though, and I'm going to go to the option here of snapping, and I'm just going to go ahead and move that into the center of our canvas. Make sure we hit this orange line here. And make sure that touches the top of the screen. I'm going to tap on my cursor when I'm done. Now that that's in play, we'll go ahead and fill out the rest of the sky in the background before we work on this, because the colors are going to change as we sort of work around it. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer, drag it underneath the beam. We're going to go to our colors, and we've got a couple of blues here to be working with in the background. So we're going to grab this color here, the bottom of that third column from the right. Your brush wants to be set to something like airbrushing and the soft brush. And size, I'm going to move it into around about sort of 14-13% range. And I'm going to very lightly just dance my pen around the sky a little bit. So a little bit more blue down here, just sort of very lightly with my pressure, just sort of wobbling it all over the place and just varying the sky and adding in some just lovely blue sky tones. Because like a night scene like this, or just a sky scene in general, if you add in some really nice patches and variations in color, you can get some real sort of almost realistic vibe to it, because it wouldn't be solid black, not in this case anyway. We've got lots of lighting happening in a galaxy. So I've just sort of danced my pen around. You might just about be able to see it, you might not. I'm going to reduce it down to 8% though, and just sort of wiggle in a little bit more pressure here and there. Just a little bit of blue, just to, again, sort of vary up the sky, a little bit more blue down here. Then we're going to go ahead and add in the galaxy layer that's going to sit in behind our beam here. So we're going to create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab this color here, the middle of the far right column. And our brush wants to be set to the option of luminance, and we're going to use the nebula brush. Now the nebula brush, I typically tend to keep it a little bit lower on the opacity side. I've got it down to 53%. And size wise, We're going to start off with something a little bit larger, maybe around about sort of 8%. And then from there, we can get smaller and smaller. Now you want to focus a little bit more of this sort of galaxy effect in the center. So I'm starting off really light with my pressure, even though the opacity is low, just so I can start to build it up. And I'm going to kind of just sort of S my way round this sort of beam here to try and sort of build up a bit of a galaxy. And then from there, I can sort of blend it out a little bit. And I want to primarily focus, as you'll have been able to see from the sort of finished result of this, the sort of galaxy towards the center area. We're going to focus it towards the center as if this sort of column here is maybe a rip in the galaxy, and that there is like a galaxy forming around it potentially, and it's lighting up the galaxy we're in. So I want to kind of make it quite mystical, and you can see I'm building up the color, just trying to get those really awesome tones. And then I want to just make sure it blends out on the edges. So I'm just going to slowly just sort of think about sort of blending that out a little bit further, sort of dragging our galaxy a little bit wider here and there. Again, I'm being super, super light with my pressure. So if you're struggling for your pressure already, you may need to lower the opacity down a little bit further. I'm going to make sure this just runs all the way up to the very top of our canvas up here. Just a couple of little extra flicks here and there. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to our layers and create another new layer. We'll change the blend mode from normal, we'll change it to add. And we're going to continue with the same brush, except now we're going to reduce it down in size, maybe down to around about sort of 3%, and try and make some additional galaxies. So I'm going to go ahead and just very lightly just try and plan out a little bit of a route. So maybe we'll come through here and then we'll make our way up here. And then I'm just taking a look at my design and just trying to see where I can maybe sort of just bring in some slightly more sort of detailed areas of this galaxy. I'm going to let one run right here, so right alongside our little tear in the galaxy, our little column, I'll refer to it as, but little column here, and then a little line off. And then in this space here, I've got a lovely big space here I can sort of work with, so I can just bring in some color. I can let it tear off. You don't have to have it in a sort of straight line, but something like that just is sort of a guide to start with. And then just bring your brush size down even smaller, maybe down to 1 or maybe even 2%. And then in the work that you've just made, just refine it. Create the center of that galaxy and how bright it is, that little tear there in the galaxy that we're creating, in this sort of mystical world almost. Just sort of plan it out, sort of just build it up slowly, create some awesome little tears, and they don't have to be in lines, they can be in sort of circular shapes, any sort of shape that you like. But start off really, really light if you can, and just slowly build up the color and focus in certain areas. You know, like here, I might want to sort of build up that color a bit more there. I'm going to bring that around the other side of our column and then just sort of tear that up into the top area here of our canvas, and letting that kind of just run astray. And I've gone a little bit heavier there, which means I might need to sort of blend it out a little bit. I'm just going to sort of just with my pen, just very lightly, just continue to sort of blend that. And then you can leave little gaps. You don't have to connect them all perfectly every single time. So I'm just going to wobble my pen in here, creating another little sort of wobble of the galaxy. I'm going to leave that for a minute. I'll come back to it in a moment. I'm just going to do exactly the same here. I'm kind of looking for the center point of what I've drawn in previously and trying to just increase the color, increase the brightness. We've got stars to add in, so don't worry about sort of filling in the entirety of your design. In a moment when we add in some stars, they'll fill out your galaxy a little bit more. And I mean galaxy in terms of this entire space back here. I'm just going to bring that across, and then maybe even the tiniest little sort of tear that comes across over here. Just a little one, so it just makes its way across like so. Almost like space lightning at the same time. I'm going to reduce the brush size down even further, down to a small 1%, and just get into the center area here. If you can spend a little bit of time on this, just adding in some lovely sort of brighter spots here, and really sort of flush these out a little bit, they will look fantastic. So just spend some time if you can, nice and sort of patient with it, no rush. Just a little something like that. And then up here as well, we'll do the same. So I'm just going to bring this one down, and I'm sort of going up and down in a bit of a vertical fashion here, and I'm trying not to sort of draw in lines almost. I'm trying to just add in little wobbles, little tremors here and there. And then maybe we sort of thicken this area out here, but we maybe leave the rest to be kind of faded out. So maybe I'll just sort of blend that in a little bit more, thickening that up, and then we'll leave up here, we'll maybe leave a gap, but then a tiny bit in here as well, or something like this. And then I'll leave that left side. I don't need to make it quite as bright. Now I'm going to go ahead quickly and go back down to the layer underneath and just increase my brush size back up to around about sort of 5%. I just want to sort of increase the color a little bit closer to the column. I've not added enough, in my opinion, just close to the column here, where we've got this like some sort of event happening in the sky. And I want to just add in a little bit of more color up here. That looks pretty good. And I'll just blend that out a little bit with some nice light strokes there, just to sort of push it side to side a bit more. I'm going to add in a little bit more here as well, because where I feel I've added in these little tears of our galaxy, I want to make sure that there is a good amount of color around them. There should, in my opinion, be like one of the more colorful areas. And then I'm going to go back to the add layer. I'm going to make the brush size somewhere around about sort of 4%, and I'm just going to chunk out a few of my lines as well here, because I don't want them to be super fine lines. I want them to be large sort of areas like this, like large glowy areas. About 3%. It's going to increase the size. It will increase the glow, but I'm just trying to be very sort of careful with it and try and just sort of create trails off from them. I don't want them to look like lightning as such. I want them to look like those galaxy tears. And I think I've just drawn in my lines a little bit too sort of in a line fashion. So I'm just fluctuating between 3 and 2% here, just to try and change the shape a little bit of some of these tears that I've just created. I can always come back to it at a later date. Let's add in some stars in here as well. So we're going to go ahead and create another new layer. I'm going to go to our colors, and we're going to grab this color here, the top of that second column from the right. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to stay in the same collection, so the luminance. We're going to use the light pen, and I always max out the size and max out the opacity. And then from there, just add in as many sort of stars as I like, with small pressure for some really small dinky stars. And then I can add in some much needed occasional larger stars, just to create that wonderful variation. I've spoke loads of times in my tutorials about sort of variation of star sizes, and so we always want that small, medium and large kind of variation in our stars. Just fills out the scene a lot more, makes it a little bit more realistic to have a couple of larger ones, maybe not quite as large as that one, but also the tiny, tiny, tiny little ones here and there. I think they are the most critical. If you create a sort of star scene like this that's got quite large stars only, it's not going to be quite as convincing. If you get those really tiny, tiny ones in there, it creates a lot of depth. It shows you how far away we're able to see in this scene because of the tiny, tiny stars just glowing in the distance. Add in a few more down here. I'm going to start to think about maybe adding in a couple of larger ones here and there. Just a couple more clustered together maybe. So where I've got a few little sort of areas, I can just maybe think, oh, can I brighten one of those 3 or 4 out a little bit more, just to bulk out the scene. You can see me undoing them occasionally as well. I like to keep them in the video because I want to show, you know, one, I'm also human, I'm not a machine, but also at the same time, the things I'm not looking for at the same time as what I am looking for. Now you'll see I'm primarily sort of left this area here and this area here, because that's where 2 planets are going to go in a moment. So you don't need to add in too much in those areas. I'm just going to add in a few more here and there. We can, as always, come back to it if needs be. We're going to go ahead though and now adjust our little galaxy sort of rip here, this column. So we're going to go to the column. We're going to go ahead and we're going to swipe it to the left and duplicate it. The top one out of the 2, we're going to go ahead and we're going to change the blend mode from normal to add. We're going to go ahead though and we're going to bring the opacity down. We're going to bring it down to about sort of 45%. I'm going to turn off the one underneath for a moment. I'm then going to go ahead and swipe that top one to the left and duplicate it. I'm then going to go ahead and tap on the layer. I'm going to go ahead and alpha lock it. I'm going to go to my colors. I'm going to go ahead and grab this color here. It is the middle color in that 3rd column from the right. Go back to the layer, tap on it and fill it. And the blend mode can be changed from normal, well, add what it was, to multiply. We're then going to go ahead and we're going to grab our cursor I'm going to zoom in and we're going to use the freeform option just to make this a little bit more narrow than the beam itself. And again, we want to make sure we're in the center of our design, so always keep dragging it into the center using snapping so you get that orange line. And we want to create this sort of lighter side on either side. So I'm just going to make it a bit narrower and then tap on my cursor when I'm done. You should end up with a little something like this. What we then want to do is also go ahead and swipe this layer to the left and duplicate it. So that center point is going to be a little bit more green now. It's going to be a little bit more punchy. And then the additional one that we created underneath our yellow, we're going to go ahead and turn that back on. We're going to change the blend mode from normal to add. And we're going to go ahead and go to our adjustments, Gaussian blur, and we're going to swipe from left to right, and we're going to add in a bit of a glow here. So you can just drag this out. I recommend up to around about sort of something around about sort of up to 10. 9 looks pretty good there. You've got some really nice glow coming off of it. So I'm going to go up to 9. I'm going to tap on my adjustments when I'm done, and we've got this little rip here in the galaxy, which I think looks awesome. Let's then add in some environmental light at the bottom. So we're going to go into our layers. We're going to go above our little columns here and create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the middle color here in the far right column. And our brush wants to be changed to airbrushing and the soft brush. I'm going to make the brush something around about sort of 20%. And we're going to go left to right across the horizon. So we're just going to go left to right, adding in a bit of a glow. We're going to bring the orange up a little bit, up like so, and then go along that horizon just with a nice light glow. And you can get a little bit more sort of punchy towards the bottom here. We're then going to go to our layers and create another new layer. We'll change the blend mode from normal, change it to add. And we're going to switch the color out to the yellow above it, so the top of that far right column. I'm going to reduce the brush size down though. I'm going to bring it down to about sort of 10% and just go along the horizon line here. Just trying to create a bit of an even sort of glow and just a bit of a more sort of sharper glow just towards that bottom edge. A little something like this. Then we're going to go ahead and go to our layer to create another new layer. Change the blend mode from normal to add again. And we're going to add in a bit of a kind of sun almost. It's going to look like a sun, but what I'm imagining is in the distance somewhere on this planet, going round in a circle, there is something happening, some sort of event that is causing this beam up into the sky. So I'm going round in a circle here. I'm going to just increase it a little bit in size just to try and make it a little bit more glowy. I'm making sure it's even on both sides. And I might just need to expand that on the left, but primarily making sure you get that center point here. And you can reduce the brush size maybe down to about sort of 6% and create like a proper little sort of circle glow here. Again, we want this to be quite nice and punchy and also quite striking because we want to show that there is something happening causing this effect. So now we've done that, we can now add in our planets. So we're going to go ahead and create those planets. Now I'm going to create 2 new layers and swipe from left to right on both and group them together. And I'm going to rename this group and I'm going to call it Planet. And we'll call it Planet 1 because we're going to duplicate this group in a moment for a second planet. We're going to go ahead and on the bottom layer out of the 2, we're going to go to our colors and grab the middle color in the far right column. And our brush wants to be changed to calligraphy and the monoline brush. Does not matter what brush size it is. All we want to do is draw in a circle over here, roughly around about sort of this sort of scale is pretty good, roughly about sort of 1 column in height. Something like this, and then drag and drop the color in. If we then go ahead and grab our cursor, I'm just going to position this a little bit higher. I want it to sit here, and I'm going to make mine a little bit smaller, and I'll even give you the final size as well, just so you can match up to mine if you wish. And size-wise, mine is just under 600, 596. And I'm going to tap on my cursor when I'm done. We're going to add in the Dove Lake texture. So we're going to go ahead and on our layers, the empty layer above, we'll tap on it and we will clipping mask it. So it's now clipped to the orange circle. And if we go to our colors and we go ahead and we grab this color here in the bottom right of the palette, we go to our brush, we go into the option of textures and Dove Lake. Set the brush size to maybe around about sort of 21%. All you need to do is cover the entirety of your little planet here, little something like this. And then we're going to go to our adjustments. We're going to go to the option of liquefy and we're going to use the option here of expand. Now size wise, you can see my settings here at the bottom and they're probably a little bit too big there on the brush. Probably can bring that down a little bit. We need to go round in a circle and expand the center area of our planet, pushing the edges to the edge of the planet. So what I mean by that is we're pushing the edges of the texture right up against the edge of the circle, which just sort of gives you a bit more of a spherical look where the details towards the edge of the planet are being pushed right up against it, and this center area here that we're primarily looking at is a lot larger in terms of the texture. So we're crushing it on the outside and expanding it on the center. And as long as you have something like this, you can tap on your adjustments when you're done. We can then go ahead and we can create some lighting to this. So we can go ahead and create another new layer. We'll tap on it and we will clipping mask it. We will leave the blend mode as normal. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this color here. It is the middle of that second column from the right. Your brush wants to be changed to airbrushing and the soft brush. And we're going to bring that brush size to something a bit more controllable, probably around about sort of 7 or 8%. And we're going to brighten up the left edge here that's facing our little column, our little galaxy event here. So we're going to just brighten this up along here. That looks pretty good to me. We can then go ahead and go to our layers and create another new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it, and change the blend mode from normal to add. And we're going to repeat, but just right up against the edge. So I've reduced the brush size down to about sort of 4% here. And then just on this edge, you can add in this fantastic sharp highlight where the event is causing that rebound of light onto our planet. Now, a really cool trick what we can do to really blend this into its environment is if we go to the circle itself and we go ahead and we tap on it and add a mask, we can then go ahead and make sure we're on the mask, which we are. So just make sure you're here. Your color is set to black. Double tap at the bottom of the disc if you need to. And we just need to make our brush size probably around about sort of 8%, if not slightly larger, maybe around about 10 or 12. And we can blend out the areas that we want to sort of keep in the shade. So I'm going to go round in a circle down here, just continuously, and build up a bit of a shadowed side to this planet. And it will just literally fade in to the sky. And that's what we want. We want to really just focus the light just up on this edge. We don't want any light down here and over on the sides we've not added any to. You can just blend that out entirely. And I'll go ahead and bring that down a little bit more because I just want to very lightly just sort of take away a bit of lighting on that top edge. I still want to leave a little bit of that curve there, but nothing too sort of intense. And what we can also do is we can go ahead and go to our brush and go to something such as the texture of the Dove Lake brush. If we bring that down in size to maybe around about sort of 10%, we could lightly just sort of go over the top of here, just adding in some darker patches to this edge of the planet. That's a bit optional. That's totally up to you. I've ended up with some really dark crevices here, and I don't mind that. I don't mind that on that edge there. It's a bit more sort of character to it. Now, one thing you will need to factor in, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 little stars there. We need to go back down to our stars layer. So we need to go down and find that layer. Once you've found it, just grab your eraser, tap on your eraser and change it to say something like the soft airbrush under airbrushing or the monoline brush. And just get rid of the stars that sit within the boundary of that planet, because it wouldn't make sense that you'd be able to see them. So we're just getting rid of any stars like so. I might even just get rid of that one there as well, just because it's a bit too close. So that's planet number 1 done. Now we're going to go ahead, and this planet here is going to be duplicated and put up here. If you're running out of layers, you may need to go ahead and tap on this group, flatten it, and then create a whole new planet again, following the previous steps that we did. But for now, I'm going to swipe it to the left and duplicate it. I'll rename the top one and I'll call it planet number 2. So we'll just change the 1 to a 2. And then we're going to go ahead and grab our cursor. We're going to use the uniform option just to scale it down in size. I'm going to grab this green node here at the top and rotate it round and then push it up here. Just so we've got 2 planets, and I want to position it somewhat here, just overlapping this top row into the second row a little bit. And I think that looks pretty cool. I'm quite happy with that. I might bring the size down and a little bit off to the left. And then I'm going to tap on my cursor when I'm done. And before I carry on, I want to go ahead and go back down to our stars layer again. And then just quickly remove any stars, again, that are a little bit too close or in the boundary of the planet. And I think I'm going to remove that one, or even just take it down a few shades. I'll do the same over there too. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go into our planet number 2 group. The base color here for the planet, I'm just going to simply go to my colors and grab the color in the top right of the palette and drag it in. And we'll have changed the planet from the sort of red tone into a golden yellow tone. It's totally up to you. You don't have to make that change. It's totally up to you what you want to do. And then what we're going to go ahead and do, our planets are done with. So we can now simply go ahead and tap on the group. We can flatten it. We'll tap on planet number 1, tap on it and flatten it. But now we just need to add in some glows around them as well. So we're going to go ahead, and I've got the planet here on the right hand side. I'm going to swipe it to the left and duplicate it, and then I'm going to swipe that to the left and duplicate it as well. The bottom one out the two, we're going to go to our adjustments. We're going to go to Gaussian blur. So I'm on the bottom layer out of all three. I'm going to swipe this to the left, and I'm going to give it around about sort of a 14% Gaussian blur, and it's going to create a bit of a glow here. I'm then going to go ahead and go to the layer above it, change the blend mode from normal to add, and then I'm going to go ahead and go to my adjustments, Gaussian blur, and give this a very light Gaussian blur. So something around about sort of 6 to maybe 7%. You could go even smaller if you wanted to, something maybe around about 5. And it's just going to really sort of blur out and blow out that corner here of the circle, and then tap on my adjustments when I'm done. We're then going to go ahead and do the same for the planet above. So I'm going to go ahead and swipe from left to right on all three layers for planet number 1 that was on the right hand side, and I'll just rename that group and call it planet 1 again, just so it's nice and organized in our layers. I'll collapse that down. I'll go to the planet on the left and swipe from left to right and duplicate it until I have 3, and swipe from left to right on all 3 and group them together. I'm then going to rename that group, and I'm going to call it planet 2. And then the bottom layer out of all 3 of them, we'll go to our adjustments, Gaussian blur. We'll Gaussian blur that out to around about sort of 12 to 13% again. Then go back to my layers and go upper layer, change the blend mode from normal to add, and then we'll go ahead and go to our adjustments, Gaussian blur, and swipe from left to right, adding in a very small glow as well. And then, so I've gone up to 6%. Now, one thing with the add is on both of these is it's going to start to color the planet a bit more. So what you can do is, making sure you're on the add layer, grab your eraser, make sure it's the soft airbrush under airbrushing, about sort of a 6% here. I'm going to get rid of the color inside the planet here to darken it up. So it's going to focus the glow on the outside edge. So I'm just erasing from the center there. And not only do you do that on the add layer, you do it on the layer underneath set to normal. So I'm on the bottom layer in this group now and just erasing from the planet area only, trying to leave the glow on the outside. So if I then go into my planet number 1 group as well, we go down to the normal layer inside there, to the bottom one out of the 3. We can go ahead, slightly larger brush size because it's a larger planet, and with a 7%, you can see if I just keep the color or the eraser on the inside of the planet, I can get rid of all this extra color and darken it up like it was before. And then do the same for the add layer as well. So go to the add layer, remove it from the planet. Now that's just totally optional again. You don't have to do this. I want that darker look to it because I want just the light to simply come from here. So now we've done with this top area. Make sure you're happy with how it looks. And now we're going to make the reflection underneath. So we're going to simply swipe down with 3 fingers and go to the option of copy all. Now that'll have copied everything on the screen. And if you make sure in your layers, you're right at the top and you create a new layer. If we then go ahead and swipe down with 3 fingers and paste, it'll have pasted it onto that empty layer. We can flip it vertically, and then we can go back to the layer. We will tap on it and we will clipping mask it to the block layer here for our water. And making sure you've got the image that's flipped upside down, just go back to your cursor, grab freeform. I'm going to make it a little bit sort of flatter in its image, and then I'm going to drag it down, and we want that horizon to match up like so. So making sure you're still in the center. There's no pixel gap there. You do have a nice reflection, and you can make it a little bit smaller. You just want to make sure you get a good amount of sort of the color here, because this is where our subject's going to be. So like a little sort of flatter area like this. I'm going to tap on my cursor when I'm done. We're then going to go to our adjustments. We're going to go to the option of motion blur, and we're going to drag from left to right on the screen and add in a little bit of a motion blur here. So I'm going to go up to around about sort of 15%. And making sure you go nice and horizontal. So I want to make sure I go perfectly horizontal again, like so. And then I'm going to go to my smudge tool. I'm going to tap on the smudge tool, and I'm going to use the painting brush of the turpentine. I'm going to set the brush size to around about sort of 12%. And we're going to bring in from the outside, and we're going to just push left to right. Keep your pressure nice and light, and just sort of make sure you're going quite horizontal. We can just sort of push in like highlight. We can push in shadows of the water. And I'm just going to keep making my way across, just trying to make some adjustments here and there. It's going to somewhat sharpen up your water as well, because we're sort of adding in a smudge. It's going to create quite a sort of defined line in here. And we just want to just add in a very light amount of smudge here and there. I want the water to have a bit of a kind of like glassy look to it. I don't want it to be too blurred out. And the green here in the middle, you can see I'm kind of sort of quite tentatively sort of pushing it left to right, because it does have a little bit of sort of a, if you blur the green out, so for example, if I push that way, I don't like the look of it. The green is quite a dominating color in this scene, so we want to be quite sort of tentative around it. I don't want to create a big smudge of green across the screen. And you don't have to do a lot of this, just a little bit left and right. You don't even have to do any of it, to be honest with you. I just quite like the occasional little ripple in the water that I can see. And also you can push the color outwards as well, so you can kind of push it a little bit further beyond the sort of reflection a bit more. But again, I think it just sharpens up the water a bit more, gives us a little bit crispy look to it. Because we've motion blurred it, we've lost a little bit of those details, but this just shows you that the reflection is still there, but then you have the sort of water ripple lines, where the water is, you know, being caught by the lighting and giving us a lovely little ripple on the surface. And I want it again quite sort of glassy looking, so I don't want to smudge in too much. Again, I'm being very, very tentative here and there. I'm not pressing very heavy at all. Just trying to see what we can come up with, what will look quite good. The odd sort of run through there will look quite nice. But again, don't be afraid to potentially try and push like the lighter tones here outwards. And that's a little bit too much. I've got a particular sort of look in mind, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. Let's then go ahead and make a minor adjustment to this layer by tapping on it and bringing its opacity down to about sort of 70%. And then we're going to go ahead and introduce our subject. So we're going to create a new layer at the top. And for you, I'll have provided a very simple sort of guide on how you can bring them in. It's the same way you would bring in a stencil guide. We're just adding in the subject. So if you need to, hit the link in the description down below on how you can do that. And otherwise, you're just going to need to go up to your files or photos and insert the image. So once you've got your kayaker in place, you can then go ahead and uniform this down and bring them onto the water at the bottom. Now, you kind of have a couple of decisions to make here, and it's totally up to you about your preference. You can make the kayaker sort of around about this size if you want, sort of blocking the sun a little bit. But to me, I want this to look really epic. I want it to look unreal, some sort of epic scene or event happening in the sky. And if you make your kayaker quite small, you know, around about sort of width-wise, around about 300, it makes this look more grand because your kayaker is so small. So depending on sometimes how you make your subject is sort of the main focus in most designs. If you make them too big, it dwarfs the size of everything else. Your brain makes the calculation of how big something else is based on who the subject is. You know how big a person is and a kayak is, so you know then how big this scene should be. If you make them really small, you can then add even more grandness to this, but they're going to get lost a little bit in the design. So it's totally up to you how big or small you want to make them. It's down to your preference. I'm going to make them around about 308 width for the moment. I'm going to position our subject just underneath our sun here, so around about here, and then tap on my cursor when I'm done. We're then going to go ahead and go to our layer for our subject and swipe it to the left and duplicate it. The bottom one out the two, we're going to grab our cursor and we're going to grab the freeform option. And we're going to just stretch out our subject, trying to create like a bit of a long sort of drag of our shadow. So something around about sort of this in terms of sort of the look for it. And we want to make sure, of course, we flip it then vertically as well. So then we end up with the hat in the sort of correct sort of shadow position. So something around about sort of this looks pretty good to me. Let's make that a little bit longer. And then tap on your cursor when you're done. Then go to your adjustments and go to the option of perspective blur. And it'll put this little dot in the center, which means everything that faces that dot is blurred out in the direction of the dot. If you move the dot over here, it would blur it horizontally. But we want to go ahead and leave the dot where it is and just simply swipe from left to right, adding in a little sort of perspective blur here. So something around about sort of 30% looks very good to me. I'm going to leave it around about that 30% mark and tap on my adjustments when I'm done. And then we're going to go ahead and change the blend mode of this layer from normal. We're going to change it to the option of soft light. And then taking a look at that, it'll just blend it in a little bit more into sort of the colors of our scene a bit more. Then on our subject, we're going to zoom in. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer above our subject and tap on it and clipping mask it. And if you want to, you can swipe from left to right on all three layers so far and group them together and rename this and call it subject. So once we've done that, this empty layer here that's now clipped, we're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the middle color here in the far right column. Your brush wants to be set to the option of, we're going to go to inking and the dry ink. Now size wise, I think it's going to be set to about sort of 10% to start with. You may vary. We're just going to go ahead and add in some sort of edge highlights here. So I'm probably going to reduce that brush size down. I'm going to bring it down to about sort of 6%. And I'm just going to add in like a little bit on the hat here. I'm going to add in along this line here. A little bit more maybe on the top surface of the hat. A little something like this. Then we'll add some on the back end of the hat. Like here on that little area there that's going to catch some light. We can go ahead and just add in like a little bit of light down the face. Just a tiny bit. So just a tiny bit down there. We'll add some onto the collar. I'm going to bring that brush size down again. I'm going to bring it down to about sort of 3% here. So I can be a lot more in control. I'm going to go along the top of the shoulder, down the arm. And you can see I'm not trying to catch on everything. I've left little gaps here. That's maybe a crease in the clothing. That just means that there is no highlight. We'll then go ahead and go along the top surface of it as well. We'll move along to the other one as well. Go along that top edge, like so. We'll go down the opposite side of the body. So again, we've got another sort of shoulder to go round, down the sleeve. You can add in like slightly larger areas here if you want to, if you think the lighting's going to catch correctly. We're then going to add some to the kayak. So I'm going to kind of just round off the kayak a bit. So kind of round him a little bit, or her, our subject here. And then go round here. Adding some onto that top surface of the kayak. Just kind of blending it out as it gets further back as well, where it just wraps around the body. And then feel free to sort of have some fun, maybe sort of thinking about like the odd sort of, again, little crease of clothing that just catches the light in a certain way. It will just add in that extra little bit of detail should it be visible. And then taking a look, you should have added in some awesome highlights. But let's really make these a lot more punchy. We're going to go to the layer, we're going to swipe it to the left and duplicate it. The top one out the two, alpha lock it. Change the color to the option here of the middle of the second column from the right. Go back to the layer, tap on it and fill it. Then change the blend mode from normal, change it to the option of add. And then the bottom layer, so the orange layer that you created, go to your adjustments, go to gauge and blur, zoom in, and then we're just going to swipe from left to right, just blurring that into the body a bit more. So you're going to create a bit of a glow around your subject. So I've gone up to around about sort of 5%. You could probably go a little bit less, maybe 4 or 3, just to keep that glow a little bit closer. And that's looking a little bit too bright. So what we'll do is we'll go to the add layer, we'll bring the opacity down, and we're going to bring it down to around about sort of 60%, which will just mute it down. But it will also give it a little bit more of an orange color, and I think it looks fantastic. And if I go ahead and we pinch with 2 fingers, we go full screen with 4, we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this kayaking in space design. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, share them with the community over on Discord. And as always, a massive shout out to all of my supporters over on Patreon who help make these videos possible. If you want to get your name featured in videos, but most importantly, get access to a catalogue of nearly 90 tutorials at the time of recording, with 3 more added every single month. You can also get sneak peeks, early access, and much, much more. So hit the link in the description down below and come and support me over there on Patreon. And if you like this tutorial here on YouTube, you'll probably like this one on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.